Good evening. It's Thursday, 27th of March, and here's what's making news around the world on World News Tonight. War leak. The Atlantic shares transcript of war planning chat involving Trump officials. Public dissent. Rear Gaza protesters chant Hamas out amid mounting civilian frustration. Feline fame. Record-breaking cat Mr. Pugsley Addams stands with world's longest tail.
From Colombo, this is World News Tonight with Prashansa Gunawardana.
Good evening once again. The Atlantic has published the full transcript of a Signal group chat where senior Trump administration officials, including Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth and National Security Advisor Michael Waltz, discuss imminent military operations in Yemen.
It was the screenshot the world was waiting for, after members of the now infamous Houthi PC small group lined up on Tuesday to insist no classified information was shared on the Signal chat. The Atlantic magazine dropped the so-called war plan Pete Hegseth sent to senior intelligence officials and a journalist from the Atlantic, that readers might judge for themselves.
12:15 estimated time, F-18's launch, first strike package. 13:45 trigger-based, F-18 first strike window starts. Target terrorist is at his known location, so should be on time. Also, strike drones launch MQ-9s.
After the initial strike, the target is identified on Signal as the Houthis' quote, top missile guy. Members of the Signal thread are now saying the Atlantic magazine's editor Jeffrey Goldberg oversold the extent of the breach. Among them, the Pentagon chief himself.
Nobody's texting war plans. There's no units, no locations, no routes, no flight paths, no sources, no methods, no classified information.
This after Goldberg's original article said the plan included precise information about targets. But in the hands of foreign intelligence, the messages sent 2 hours before 0 hour would have been an ample tip-off to Houthi command of an impending attack.
Everyone here knows that the Russians or the Chinese could have gotten all of that information, and they could have passed it on to the Houthis, who easily could have repositioned weapons and altered their plans to knock down planes or sink ships. I think that it's by the awesome grace of God that we are not mourning dead pilots right now.
The White House have defended the use of the Signal platform as an approved app.
President Donald Trump has announced sweeping 25% tariffs on all cars not manufactured in the United States, a bold move aimed at protecting domestic automakers that could inflame trade tensions with allies, including Canada, Japan, and Germany.
U.S. President Donald Trump signed an executive order on Wednesday local time to impose a 25% tariff on cars from overseas. The tariffs will go into effect on April 2nd, the day Washington is expected to announce wide-ranging levies on other goods from around the world. It will apply to finished cars and trucks that are shipped into the United States. This follows Trump's 25% tariffs on steel and aluminum imports, which went into effect on March 12th. While saying this executive order is going to lead to tremendous growth in the automobile industry, he added many foreign car companies that already have factories in the U.S. will be able to expand their currently low utilization rate cheaply and quickly.
But this is very exciting to me. This is the automobile industry, and this will continue to spur growth like you haven't seen before.
Inevitably, the tariff plan will significantly impact South Korea, which is the third largest car importer to the U.S. following Mexico and Japan. In 2024, South Korea's automobile exports to the U.S. amounted to around $34 billion US, about 51 trillion Korean won, accounting for more than 49% of the total automobile exports. Amid such tariff pressure, Hyundai Motor Group has come up with a strategy to overcome this by expanding local production in the U.S. On Monday, it announced an investment of worth $21 billion in the U.S. over the next 4 years, including a plan for Hyundai Steel to build a new plant in Louisiana, which is set to supply steel for Hyundai's auto parts and auto plants in Alabama and Georgia.
Tesla is set to officially launch in Saudi Arabia next month as Elon Musk mends ties with the kingdom. The expansion marks a major breakthrough in US-Saudi Arabia business relations after years of strained communications.
Tesla will start sales in Saudi Arabia next month. The electric car maker made the announcement on its website Wednesday. It signalled CEO Elon Musk and the kingdom have healed their fallout. The rift dated back to the billionaire's short-lived bid in 2018 to take the company private. The dispute started when Musk tweeted at the time he had funding secured to take Tesla private after meeting Saudi Arabia's sovereign wealth fund, the Public Investment Fund. His tweet eventually led to a lawsuit from investors when a bid failed to appear. The suit saw tense text messages between Musk and PIF head Yasser Al-Rumayyan made public. But tensions have eased since the autumn when Musk took a high-profile role in US President Donald Trump's election campaign. Trump said this month he would likely make his first trip abroad to Saudi Arabia. Tesla said its launch event is due in Riyadh on April 10th. It comes as Tesla has seen EV sales fall in Europe, which has been blamed on Musk's support for far-right politicians. The brand has also been targeted by protesters in the US as he leads sweeping cuts to the federal government.
Fueled by strong winds and dry conditions, wildfires in South Korea have now claimed 18 lives, with emergency crews battling blazes across multiple regions in what is shaping up to be one of the deadliest fire seasons in years.
At least 18 people have died as multiple wildfires rage across South Korea's southeastern region. The fires, some of the worst there in decades, have spread rapidly and forced more than 27,000 people to flee their homes. The country's acting president, Han Duck-soo, said Wednesday that raging winds were making containment difficult. He vowed to mobilize all available support, including receiving air assistance from the U.S. military stationed in South Korea. In response to criticism about a lack of equipment in the firefighting efforts, a spokesperson for the Korea Forest Service said the agency planned to secure more helicopters. He added that nearly 5,000 firefighting personnel were being deployed on Wednesday, as well as 87 firefighting helicopters. However, the agency later said the choppers had been grounded after one crashed on Wednesday, killing the pilot, according to media reports. Rescuers were seen working at the smoldering crash site while fire trucks sprayed water towards the smoke. Multiple blazes that broke out on Saturday are yet to be contained, gutting ancient temples and destroying homes. The government has designated the affected areas as special disaster zones and said the fires had damaged more than 37,000 acres. The safety ministry said dry conditions were expected to persist in the region on Wednesday.
Let's take a short commercial break. More world news on the other side. Welcome back. Britain's finance minister has announced significant cuts to planned government spending, warning that slowing economic growth requires urgent fiscal discipline. The move comes amid rising public concern over inflation and a dip in GDP forecasts.
Britain's government is set to borrow $61.4 billion more between now and the end of the decade than expected 5 months ago. That's according to forecasts from the country's fiscal watchdog on Wednesday, as Finance Minister Rachel Reeves began a half-yearly budget update speech to Parliament. The Office for Budget Responsibility said the public finances outlook had deteriorated. It also said prospects for the economy were down and now forecasts Britain's economy to grow by 1% this year. That's half the estimate it gave in October, although it slightly increased its projections for 3 of the 4 following years. Reeves announced that she'd rebuilt a $12.8 billion fiscal buffer that was wiped out by weaker economic forecasts and rising borrowing costs since her first full budget last year.
As a result of the steps that I am taking today, I can confirm that I have restored in full our headroom against the stability rule. Moving from from a deficit of £36.1 billion in 2025-26 and £13.4 billion in 2026-27 to a surplus of £6.0 billion in 27-28, £7.1 billion in 2028-29 and a surplus of £9.9 billion in 2029-30.
Reeves said she's aiming to balance day-to-day public spending with tax revenues by 2030. She added day-to-day public spending would grow by 1.2% a year in real terms, slightly lower than her previous plan. The government had previously announced planned savings from welfare, angering some lawmakers from the governing Labour Party. Looking ahead, the OBR expects economic output to expand by 1.9% in 2026 and average 1.8% a year over the rest of the forecast. That's compared with the OBR's previous expectations for growth of 1.8% in 2026 and 1.5% in 2027.
President Emmanuel Macron has pledged an additional $2 billion in military aid to Ukraine, reinforcing France's long-term commitment to Kyiv amid Russia's ongoing aggression and as European nations work to bolster regional defense capabilities.
France is spearheading the effort to build a coalition of the willing for Ukraine, and it's leading by example. With Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky by his side, French President Emmanuel Macron announced an additional €2 billion military aid package for Kyiv. Despite Russia's participation in talks aimed at ending the war, Macron said the Kremlin was showing by its actions that it was not ready for peace, and this was not Ukraine's problem to shoulder alone.
I want to be very clear. Russia will not set the conditions for the sustainable, lasting peace, because Ukraine's sovereignty and the security of all Europeans depend on this peace.
Zelensky is in Paris to speak to European leaders, but also the people of Europe. He sat down for an almost hour-long interview broadcast by public media across the continent. He spoke of the importance of US military aid and intelligence sharing unlocked after Ukraine agreed to the US-brokered ceasefire proposal, but he warned Ukraine was fighting an information war at the highest levels.
I can't be ungrateful to the United States for everything they've done for us. But I believe they are very often, unfortunately, under the influence of Russian narratives. Saying that Putin is ready for peace, the Russian propaganda worked very well there.
At the same time, Zelensky said he believed the Trump administration would ultimately be a reliable partner, but European leaders are looking to each other. Some 30 nations are taking part in Thursday's summit in Paris. On the agenda will be immediate and future support for Ukraine, establishing a durable ceasefire and security guarantees. France and the UK have already indicated they're prepared to send ground forces to ensure a lasting peace in Ukraine.
Brazil's Supreme Court has ruled that former President Jair Bolsonaro will stand trial for allegedly attempting to orchestrate a coup after his 2022 election defeat, setting the stage for a historic legal showdown in the country.
Former Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro will stand trial for allegedly conspiring to overthrow the government after he lost an election in 2022, the Supreme Court ruled on Wednesday. A 5-judge panel decided unanimously to put Bolsonaro on trial. The court proceedings are expected later this year. If found guilty, Bolsonaro could face a long prison sentence. In his opening remarks on Wednesday, Justice Alexandre de Moraes screened dramatic footage of Bolsonaro's supporters storming government buildings. The violent scenes unfolded just a week after the inauguration of President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva in January 2023. Moraes said the insurrection was a result of Bolsonaro's, quote, systemic effort to discredit the election he lost and then conspire to overturn using violence, with the help of senior military officers and cabinet members. Bolsonaro, who was president from 2019 to 2022, is accused of 5 crimes, including an alleged attempt to violently abolish the democratic rule of law and a coup d'etat. He has denied any wrongdoing and denounced the case as politically motivated. Bolsonaro spoke at a press conference in Brasilia shortly after the ruling.
Today, I hope to put a final point on this. It looks like there is something personal against me. The accusation is very serious and unfounded.
Wednesday's ruling, roughly a month after Brazil's top prosecutor presented charges, reflected an extraordinary pace for a top court that often takes years to decide major cases. The speed reinforced views that the justices are keen to wrap up the trial before the 2026 presidential campaign gets underway. The court also accepted charges against 2 retired generals, Bolsonaro's former defense minister and his former chief of staff. It's the first time high-ranking military officials in Brazil will be put on trial for attempting to abolish democracy. Bolsonaro has insisted he will run for president again next year. That's despite a ruling barring him from running for public office until 2030 for his efforts to discredit the country's voting system.
In a rare public demonstration in Gaza, thousands of Palestinians have taken to the streets demanding the ouster of Hamas, blaming the group for ongoing suffering, poor governance and escalating violence in Israel.
A rare public show of opposition to Hamas has unfolded in Gaza as videos shared on social media on Tuesday showed hundreds of Palestinians marching in protest, demanding an end to the war. Out, 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 Hamas get out. People are heard chanting in this clip. The videos have been geolocated to Beit Lahia in the north, one of the areas in Gaza most devastated by the war. One witness said it was a spontaneous rally against the war because, quote, people are tired and they have no place to go. Israel resumed its strikes on Gaza last week, saying its goal was to completely dismantle Hamas. Since then, nearly 700 people, mostly women and children, have been killed, according to Palestinian health officials. Senior Hamas official Bassem Naim said people had the right to protest at the suffering inflicted by the war. But he denounced what he said were suspicious political agendas exploiting the situation, hinting at tensions between Hamas and the rival Fatah movement. Fatah leads the Palestinian Authority in the occupied West Bank, where Israel has ramped up raids and where the UN says there has been a significant expansion of Israeli settlements. Why don't they protest against the aggression there or allow people to take to the streets to denounce this aggression, Naim said. His comments came after Fatah urged Hamas to respond to the call of the Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip. The two movements have been at odds for years after Hamas pushed Fatah out of the enclave in 2007. They have failed to bridge differences over Gaza's post-war future, including, crucially, who would be in charge. In Israel, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was quick to say the protests showed his renewed military offensive there was working. On Wednesday, he told lawmakers that Israel would seize territory in Gaza if Hamas refuses to release all remaining hostages. Netanyahu is also facing protests, with Israeli demonstrators taking over a highway to Jerusalem on Wednesday to voice their opposition to his governance.
Let's take a short commercial break. More world news on the other side. Welcome back. In Ireland, a farmer's herd of therapy alpacas is transforming care homes and schools. The cuddly animals are helping elderly patients and children alike, reducing anxiety and foster emotional connections with overwhelmingly positive results.
Alpacas are on the loose in this Irish nursing home.
He's full of chat, isn't he?
They are here to do a job, provide therapy for the residents.
I'm just trying to think.
The animals belong to farmer Joe Feline, also known as Alpaca Joe.
Well done, boys. Well done.
When they're not roaming his farm, Feline brings them into nursing homes and schools for animal therapy. Feline ditched his office job for farming a decade ago. He bought 7 alpacas and sold his home to buy a farm to graze them.
Here, Oscar. Come here.
He says he then noticed how the alpacas helped ease anxiety among the elderly and people with additional needs.
And we just found that it lifted everybody's spirits, and that kind of has led into more work around the therapeutic side of the business that we do.
Phelan's business has grown. He now has 71 alpacas and employs 11 people.
Well done, Oscar. You're doing really well.
But only certain members of the herd are able to provide therapy.
Meet Mr. Pugsley Addams, the feline now holding the Guinness World Record for the longest tail on a domestic cat. Measuring over 1.5 feet, his tail has captured hearts and a spot in history.
In the U.S. state of Minnesota, a 2-year-old Maine Coon named Mr. Pugsley Addams has set a new Guinness World Record following an official announcement on Wednesday for the longest tail on a living domestic cat. The cat has a tail that measures an impressive 46.99 centimeters long. The feline's owner noted that Pugsley's tail drew attention during his initial veterinary visits, prompting the official measurement. Described as having a mischievous yet affectionate nature, Pugsley was named after a character from the American sitcom The Addams Family.
At a California adult daycare, seniors are finding comfort and joy from therapy visits by 2 miniature horses brought in by actress and filmmaker Derana to provide emotional support and companionship.
If unbridled joy had its own distinct rhythm, folks here might say it sounds something like this.
You're cute!
Meet Ziggy and Romeo. By far, this pair of mini horses are the 2 biggest stars ever to trot through Senior Concerns Adult Daycare, offering plenty of pets and lots of unconditional love.
You are my best friend!
And folks here aren't afraid to admit they need it. Truth is, many come to the daycare suffering from the maladies of a lifelong march. Things like Alzheimer's and dementia, where loneliness only makes things worse. And if that cowgirl handler looks a little familiar, that's because it's actress Daryl Hannah, completely off script, cast in a role she's come to adore, caregiver. Daryl has been coming to the daycare for nearly a year now. Folks like Mike say these are the best days. Showing up, sharing love.
Give me a kiss.
Sometimes the best care is the simple act of being there.
Aww. Oh, look, he's smiling.
Well, that's a wrap from all of us here at World News Tonight. Stay tuned as Anuradha Vikramasinghe will be shortly joining you with the nightly business report. I'm Prashansa Gunawardana and we are leaving you with scenes from London's new immersive exhibition where you can step back in time to ancient Egypt. Thank you for watching us and have a great night.